Hey, listeners, ready to transform your sleep? Cozy Earth is all about lasting luxury and comfort. Their bamboo sheets have been called the world's softest sheets, cooling, moisture wicking, and unbelievably soft. And I can tell you they get better with every wash. And they have a 100-night sleep trial and a 10-year warranty.
But it doesn't stop there. They have bath, sleepwear, loungewears, and even skincare. Free shipping on orders of $50 or more.
Make sure you go to cozyearth.com, use our code INFOGO at checkout to save 21% off. You can find all of this in the show notes. Welcome to the podcast. I'm William,
And I'm Kat.
and that makes this a dash of info.
A little things you want to know.
Before we had keyboards, well, we used feathers, soft ink stretching across parchment, uneven and deliberate, like, kind of thought being physically pressed into existence. And beneath it, there's the faint rustle of feathers, subtle and brief, suggesting something once was alive, still lingering in motion. A distant candle kind of flickers, hums in the background, not loud or sharp, but steady, giving the sense of a small room where time just slowed down enough to be noticeable. The sounds are not busy or layered from intensity, but restrained, creating the feeling that writing itself once demanded silence from the world around it.
Then the question arrives, what if every letter you have ever typed once required a bird? It's not framed as a dramatic statement, but as a quiet shift in perspective. Pulling modern ease backward into something heavier and more physical, typing becomes less like writing and more like the end result of a long process humans no longer have to see.
Quills are introduced as more than a tool. They are described as extensions of thought, objects that once stood between the mind and the page. Translating ideas through feather and bone. Writing through a quill was not immediate or effortless. It required preparation, shaping, and intention, turning language into something that, well, it had to be physically formed before it could exist on paper.
For nearly 1,000 years, quills were the dominant writing instrument in much of the illiterate world. They were not rare or ceremonial objects, but everyday tools used in monasteries, courts, universities, and households where writing mattered. They carried the responsibility of recording laws, stories, correspondence, and knowledge itself. Their presence was so constant that it faded into the background of daily life, unnoticed because it was, well, everywhere.
And so from here, the episode of Quill Writing begins to open, right? The story moves from the birds that provided the feathers to the monasteries where knowledge was preserved through silent labor, to the revolutions where ink shaped political change, and finally to the modern pens that, well, replaced the quill. What follows is not only the history of a writing tool, but the story of how human thought changed shape each time the method of writing it down changed with it.
Long before the quill took hold, writing was already deeply embedded in human life, but the tools behind it were, well, inconsistent, limiting, and often frustrating to use. In ancient Egypt, scribes relied on reed pens cut from river plants, and these pens could carry ink, but their tips frayed quickly, forcing constant reshaping, lines lost sharpness, strokes became uneven, and precision depended heavily on how recent the pen had been cut.
Basically, how I write today. In ancient Rome, writing took on a different form. Styluses, well, they were pressed into wax tablets, creating reusable surfaces for notes, records, and drafts. The system was efficient for temporary writing, but it really lacked permanence. To preserve anything important, well, it had to be copied onto papyrus or parchment using ink, adding an extra step where errors and inconsistencies, well, they could multiply like the telephone game.
The surfaces themselves added another layer of difficulty. Papyrus, made from plant fibers, was relatively smooth but fragile and prone to damage from moisture. Parchment made from animal skin was stronger and longer lasting, but more expensive and really less forgiving. Ink could pool, spread, or catch depending on the texture, making consistency difficult to control.
Ink flow, well, it was one of the biggest limitations across all these tools. Too much ink and it blotted. Too little and the writing became faint or kind of sketchy, scratchy, I guess. Pens scratched into surfaces instead of gliding across them. Every line required adjustment, angle, pressure, and repeated dipping, turning writing into a start and stop process rather than a continuous one.
The result was a system where writing existed, but it resisted ease. It demanded correction, repetition, and patience at every stage. Humanity had already learned how to record thought. What it had not yet found was a tool that could do it smoothly, reliably, and with control. The idea of a perfect interface between mind and page was still out there, unmade and waiting.
Around the 6th and 7th century, a shift began to take shape across Europe. It was not announced or engineered as a formal invention. It spread because it worked. Feather quills began to replace earlier writing tools, first in small pockets, then across entire systems of writing. And by the time the medieval period took hold, the quill was no longer an alternative. It had become the standard.
Its dominance would last for over 1,000 years, stretching from medieval scriptoria through the 18th century. In that time, it moved through every layer of literate society. Monasteries used it to preserve religious and classical texts. Royal courts used it to issue decrees and record law. Universities relied on it for teaching, copying, and commentary. Expanding bureaucracies used it to manage taxation, trade, and governance. Where writing was required, the quill followed.
It succeeded because it solved the problems earlier tools could not. The hollow shape of the feather, well, it acted as a natural ink reservoir, holding ink more efficiently and allowing for longer, smoother strokes before, well, needing to be dipped again. This really reduced interruption and made writing more continuous. The tip could be cut into a flexible nib, which responded to pressure and angle. With a single tool, a writer could produce both fine lines and broad strokes, which gave rise to more expressive and structured scripts. Writing was no longer just functional, it became controlled. Even it had style, right?
Right.
Stylized, I guess.
Quills were also practical. Feathers were widely available, inexpensive, and renewable. A writer did not need specialized materials or manufacturing. With a knife and some skill, a new quill could be shaped almost anywhere. Over time, this combination of control, efficiency, and accessibility made the outcome inevitable. The quill did not spread because it was novel, it spread because it outperformed everything that came before it. By the height of its use, writing and quills were inseparable. To put words on a page was almost by default, to do so through a feather.
By roughly 1000 CE, the quill was no longer rising. It had already taken its place in the center of writing culture, right? So for the next 8 centuries, to the early 1800s, it remained the dominant writing instrument across much of, well, the literate world. So during this period, writing expanded in scale and importance. Universities, well, they started to grow. They started to produce lectures, notes, copy text, which really increased, the volume of what they were writing. Legal systems became more structured, generating contracts, rulings, and records that required precision and permanence. Trade networks, they stretched across regions, relying on written agreements, inventories, and correspondence to really function. Across all these environments, one tool remained consistent.
The quill. Its dominance was not abstract, it was physical, repetitive, and constant. Scribes and writers often went through dozens of quills in a single week. The tips wore down quickly and had to be recut every few pages to maintain clean, controlled lines. Writing was continuous, but the tool required constant renewal. Certain patterns emerged through long use, like goose feathers became the most common of choice, valued for their balance of strength and flexibility. For right handed writers, Feathers taken from the left wing were preferred, as their natural curve angled away from the hand, allowing for clearer visibility and smoother movement across the page. Even the orientation of a feather became part of the writing process
So feathers taken from the left wing were preferred?
by right-handed writers. Yeah.
Yeah, factoid.
Factoid.
So, despite the maintenance, the quill remained unmatched. It adapted to different scripts, surfaces, demands. It just really didn't lose its core advantage. It could produce formal legal text, dense academic notes, or flowing correspondence with equal effectiveness, as long as it was properly shaped and maintained.
By this point, the relationship between writing and the quill was no longer optional. It was just assumed. If something was written, whether in a university, a courtroom, or along a trade route, it was most certainly written with a quill.
You know what, Kat? I'll say right here before we get into the craft of quill cutting, I say I'm going to take my quill pen and I'm going to write a note saying I'm going to go get me a Coke and take a little break.
You know what's sad? I used to have a quill pen, and that was 15 years ago. God knows what happened to it now.
Oh, so you can't write Pepsi. We'll be right back.
Stay with us. We'll be right back.
Ready to turn an ordinary day into an unforgettable adventure? Check out QR Hunter. It lets you create custom treasure hunts with reusable QR code tiles. You can personalize clues, puzzles, photo challenges. You can do it all in just a few minutes. It's perfect for birthday parties, family game nights, classrooms, parks, team building events, or if you just want to have family fun. The free QR Hunter app, it works with any smart device. The adventure, it never really ends. You can search for QR Hunter on Amazon, or you can simply click the link in the show notes. But let the adventure start today. So now that we're back, Kat was not able to quill write Pepsi, so she had to drink a Coke. Quill cutting was not an incidental task in its own right. It was practiced by scribes, specialists who understood that the quality of writing began, well, long before ink ever touched the parchment. A well prepared quill, well, it could mean the difference between smooth, elegant script and uneven, unreliable strokes. Because of this, quill cutting became, well, it was a respected profession, because think about it. If you want to have something that says William or Cat, you want to have a professional quill cutter, right?
Indeed.
Okay.
So, the primary tool used in this process was the quill knife, a small, sharp blade designed for precision rather than force. With it, the feather was carefully stripped, trimmed, and shaped. The hollow shaft was exposed and cleaned, then the tip was carved into a nib with deliberate cuts that determined how the ink would behave on the page. Before shaping, the quill was often hardened through a process called tempering, where it was briefly exposed to heat or warm sand to strengthen the structure and make it more responsive to cutting. This step gave the feather a firmer, more stable body, allowing for cleaner, more controlled strokes once writing began.
So different nib cuts, well, they produce different writing styles. A broad, flat cut might be used for, formal script with heavy, structured lettering, while a narrow angle cut, well, it allowed for a finer, more intricate handwriting. Even subtle variations in angle or length, well, it could change the personality of the writing itself, making each quill, well, kind of a custom made instrument tuned to its writer. What is it you say, romanticized?
It indeed.
But at the
It
same time, I kind of like my flowing ballpoint pen.
I'm definitely torn. They offer quill tip like metal tipped quills now on top of your
Yeah, I've
feathers.
seen those. Yeah, I've seen those, but I don't know. Quill writing seems very involved.
Well, the calligraphy in which they wrote was very much involved too.
Okay.
I think calligraphy should be the next dash.
Would calligraphy be a dash or a whole episode?
Well, that remains to be seen now, doesn't it?
Yeah, somewhere down the line. Stay tuned. To be continued. Coke.
Pepsi. So the process itself was deeply sensory. There was the faint snap of feather fibers as they were trimmed, a small but distinct sound that marked each stage of preparation. When ink was finally introduced, it behaved differently depending on how the quill had been shaped. A slight change in angle could shift the flow from thin and precise to bold and expressive, while pressure alone could alter the rhythm of each line. Writing was not uniform, it was responsive, almost conversational between hand, tool, and page.
And this is why preparing a quill was less like assembling a tool and more like fine-tuning an instrument, rather. The metaphor becomes clear in the act itself. The writer does not simply hold a pen, but conducts ink through a living extension of feather and hand, where every stroke is a performance shaped by both control and subtle imperfection.
By the 19th century, the quill began to yield a quieter revolution of its own. Metal nib pens emerged, offering a durability and consistency that natural feathers struggle to match. Unlike quills, which required constant trimming, shaping, and replacement, metal nibs could be mass produced and used for a far longer period without losing their form. Writing itself began to shift from a craft of preparation to a process of immediate access.
This transition was closely tied to industrialization. As manufacturing advanced, writing tools, well, they followed the same logic as other technologies of the era. Efficiency, standardization, and speed. Metal nib pens, well, it fit into this world that was moving faster, where correspondence increased, education expanded, and administration demanded tools that could keep up with the pace. So the quill, once essential, kind of began to feel slower by comparison, more delicate, and increasingly impractical for everyday use. It's kind of like the rotary phone when the touch tone came about, right?
Beep, beep, beep. Yes, sorry.
No, you're fine.
Yet its disappearance was not absolute. The quill did not vanish so much as step aside. It remained present in ceremonial contexts where tradition carried symbolic weight. Important documents were still occasionally signed with quills, preserving a visual connection to history and authority. Beyond official use, the quill also found refuge in calligraphy and artistic traditions, where its expressive range and organic variability were still valued. In these spaces, precision was not the only goal. Character, flow, and aesthetic individuality mattered just as much.
There is an emotional undercurrent to this transition. The quill did not fail or become obsolete in a sudden break. Instead, it receded gradually. It was replaced in function, but not entirely in meaning. It moved away from necessity and into intention, which no longer required it for writing, but chosen for it. In that retreat, it did not lose significance. It just gained a different kind of presence, right? One rooted in elegance rather than utility, as if it had stepped out of the noise of everyday use and into a quieter, more deliberate space in human expression. In other words, the artistic form of writing.
In the modern world, the quill no longer belongs to necessity, but it has not left human culture entirely. It persists in pockets where writing is treated less as a utility and more as an experience. Calligraphy artists continue to use quills and quill like pens to explore shape, rhythm, and flow, treating each stroke as a deliberate act rather than a disposable mark. In these hands, writing becomes visual music, where pressure, angle, and motion matter just as much as the words themselves.
Okay, I kind of had to picture that for just a minute. Rhythm of writing.
Hmm.
Okay. Quills also appear in historical reenactments. This is where they help reconstruct the texture of the past. In these settings, they are just props, not functional links to another way of thinking, but really allowing people to briefly, kind of think about what earlier what earlier life was like, the discipline of earlier centuries, alongside this fantasy literature and visual culture, well, they have kept the quill alive in different forms. It often appears in depictions of "You are a wizard, Harry." Should I leave that in there?
Wizards, scholars, and medieval inspired words.
There you go. And this really singles the wisdom, tradition, that is, I don't know, knowledge. And when even fictionalized, it really carries an immediate association with depth and history. And I can 100% see that.
Yes.
Okay.
Now, people continue to use quills and similar tools for a reason that goes beyond aesthetics. The slowness they impose changes the act of the writing itself. Unlike typing, which can outpace thought, a quill forces intention into every movement. The writer must consider each stroke, each pause, each dip into ink. In that delay, writing becomes physical again, not just mental. The hand must follow the mind at a measured pace, creating a rhythm that resists haste. So I'm a poet and I didn't know it.
So there is a reflection embedded in that experience, right? In a world that moves quickly, quills slow the thought down until it becomes deliberate again. They do not allow ideas to rush ahead unchecked. Instead, they make thought walk instead of a sprint, turning writing into something that is felt as much as it is expressed. And you know what? This goes along with our digital dementia.
It does.
Yeah, because I mean, think about it. You want to learn a new skill, quill writing would probably be a new skill to learn.
Quill writing in general, and then you can start with, then you can start figuring out different calligraphy styles.
Hmm, okay. I can see that. First, you got to learn how to write with the quill
Right. Right.
because it's not going to be one of those, oh, what is that? You remember when the ink pen came out with the first eraser?
Oof. Yes.
Yeah, it was so horrible. If you would like to support this podcast, tell a friend and help get the word out.
If you'd like to help us keep the show going, you can do so at Patreon. The link is in the show notes.
Kat and I have released our entire Patreon catalog entirely free for a limited time. Take advantage of it. It's just our way of saying thank you.
You can join the Facebook group at Info on the Go
Over there, you can share with us your show ideas.
or ask us a question.
But you know what? Make sure you hit that follow button wherever you get this podcast.
Send us a text using the link in the show notes or leave a review.
Leaving that review really does help others find us. But you can also email us at,
Info on the Go podcast at gmail.com.
and you can find all of this in the show notes. Till next time.
Stay curious.
Hey, listen up. All of my workforce friends out there, whether you're ranchers, farmers, or you just need a pair of good leather gloves, look no further than Bare Knuckles, the best leather gloves ever made, featuring a patent design crafted for natural curve of the fingers. These gloves deliver a perfect fit, superior protection, and all-day comfort. Made from premium leather, right now get an exclusive 15% off, and you can find that at buybareknuckles.com. But make sure you use our code INFOGO at checkout. You can find that link in the show notes. Upgrade your hands, and remember, every purchase, well, it supports the show. So thank you.
If you love unforgettable treats, you've got to try Molly B's gourmet cookies. These aren't your average cookies. Molly B's brings bold, artisan crafted cookies straight to your pantry. We're talking chocolate, cherry, and amaretto and be cordial. Earl Grey, lavender, white chocolate, and lemon glaze in the tea. Even maple, bacon, whiskey, and white chocolate in the Boss Man. Founded by a single mom from Alaska, Molly Bees has become a national sensation. You get 10% off any product using our code INFOGO at mollybees.com. Find the link in the show notes.